Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. If you've been part of the Wisdom for Working Mums community for a while, you'll know that I'm all about taking the challenges for working mums and making them easier. And one of the challenges in my own life as a working mum is how to feed my family healthy food easily and in a stress-free way. If I'm not careful, it can become a source of stress, either feeling like I'm stuck in the kitchen constantly cooking and cleaning up and not spending enough time with my kids after a day at work, or I reach for the easy solution, which often isn't healthy, and then I feel guilty for it. And I know I'm not alone in this. All too often we can get stuck in this meal rut and lose inspiration and motivation on how to do things differently. So when my guest today reached out to me to share that she's cracked the code on how to meal plan to feed your family healthy food as a busy working mum, I knew I had to speak to her. Nicole from Naturally Nic is a dietitian with nearly 30 years experience. She's a mum of 4 children and knows from personal experience the stress of that question, what's for dinner tonight? She's here to help us save time and energy in the kitchen. But more than that, she's got a powerful story to share on her own health journey that's close to my heart. In this episode, Nic shares how struggling with bulimia as a teenager led her to become so passionate about eating for health and become a dietitian, and how she found herself homeschooling her 4 children. And that's really what was the catalyst for her doing this kind of meal planning. How the fact that she hated cooking at 5 p.m. at night where she didn't know what to cook and how to create a meal plan that would kind of work for her and her family, again, inspired this journey. How kind of this approach to meal planning can save time, stress, energy and money, and how her children, who are now all grown up, now follow this approach in their own lives, which I thought was lovely to hear. Nic also shares how her shocking breast cancer diagnosis changed her focus on health. You know, she'd been a dietitian for kind of 20 years at that point, I think, and just didn't expect to ever get a cancer diagnosis. She thought she was really healthy. And so how she re-looked at kind of the whole approach to health. She shares how to make some simple and quick changes to your current meals to make them healthier, and some quick tips to make meal planning your way to well-being really easy as a busy working mum. And, you know, she talks more about her breast cancer journey and makes her rethink her relationship with alcohol, which I thought was really interesting. I've not heard somebody kind of share the insights she did. And also how the stress of being an unhappy marriage affected her health, and how she now takes a really whole kind of lifestyle approach to well-being. I really think what Nic's got to share in this will be really inspirational. So I hope you enjoy, but please do listen till the end, because I've got a really special treat for you that I think you're going to love to kick off 2021 in style, and that Nic from Naturally Nic is actually involved in. So make sure you listen till the end. But I won't keep you any longer. Let's dive in. So welcome, Nic. Thank you so much for joining me, and particularly from the other side of the world. This feels really weird that we're connected so closely but live so far apart.
I know. Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
So I wanted to start our conversation with your journey, because I just think it's such a fascinating kind of story. So how did you come to be a dietitian?
Look, I grew up kind of with a mum who struggled with her weight, and I had a fear of being overweight. So as a teenager, I actually developed bulimia and struggled with that in my late teens, early 20s. And then I remember reading a book, which many of you may read, called Raw Energy by Leslie Kenton. And it was almost like this awakening that food could be used for good and not, evil, so to speak. Yeah. And so I just became so passionate about eating for health, and ended up going back to university at 23 and becoming a dietitian.
Brilliant. And I actually think your background makes you the best person to be sharing these insights today, because clearly
your childhood experience has played a big part in this, but also the fact that you have all these insights about meal planning as a working mum. So am I right in saying that you've got 4 children who you had within 5 years of each other and you homeschooled them?
Yes, I did.
I'm in awe. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was a choice I made because I lived in a remote mining, I still do actually, in a remote mining town. And it's not that I didn't have anything against the schools per se, but I was just really passionate about my children not falling through the cracks. And so I thought, I'll just give it a go and start by, maybe I would just do primary school and they would go, into high school. But I ended up loving it. And I had always been a very routine person anyway. I'm super organised. I was the person who at university, the day that you got the assignment, I'd be in the library, getting the details and doing the research and starting that very night because I hate doing things at the last moment. Yeah. And, that kind of flows through in every area of my life. So I was one of those routine mums who, fed her babies on a gentle schedule, but it was a schedule nonetheless where we fed during the day and so you encourage them to sleep at night time. And I had all these routines in place where they had clock time and we had book reading time and we had all these different things. So homeschooling was quite easy in a way. It just sort of fitted in with that very routine kind of lifestyle that I thrived on. And doing a menu plan had two focuses really. One is I hate cooking if I have to cook at 5 o'clock at night and I don't know what I'm doing because I'm tired. I want to be finished.
Amen. Yes.
It was such a big acknowledgement when I wrote that in a blog post a couple of years ago. I actually don't like cooking if I have to do it at 5 o'clock at night. And so I would always start prepping maybe in the morning, depending on what stage I was with my parenting and my breastfeeding and pregnancy. I would often prep, lunch at breakfast or lunchtime. And then as the years rolled on and I needed to be even more organised, I thought I started sort of sitting down once a week on a Friday, or I think it might have been a Thursday, and I'd sit down and I'd go, what am I going to have this week? And I'd have just a 1 week plan. And then I would go and shop to that plan, and then I'd come home and I'd always set a couple of hours on that morning to do some food prep. So I would come home from shopping, I might have bought the kids something for morning tea, put the ones that needed to go to bed, and then, do some prep. But, that I also got sick of that. I got sick to death of sitting down every week and deciding what am I going to eat this week. So I started collecting what I would make every week. And then I sat down and spent an afternoon and wrote out and did a 3 weekly menu plan. And because really you only eat, it's not like we have, 52 meals, 52 different, meals. We tend to eat the same thing over and over. Most people would have a spaghetti bolognese weekly or fortnightly, every 2 weeks. People would have a roast or do burgers or pizzas or Mexican night. And that's the kind of themes that eventuated that I was doing a roast on a Sunday. So I had a 3 week menu plan, and I did week 1, week 2, week 3, went back to week 1. And when I was cooking for my family, we had a roast on a Sunday, and it was roast chicken, roast lamb, roast beef / pork. So the beef and the pork were only every 6 weeks, but the family liked chicken and lamb enough to have them every 3 weeks. So, and then it was kind of like maybe a barbecue on a Saturday night. Friday nights were usually pizza night. Thursday nights became Mexican nights, and as my children grew older, they started doing the Mexican night. So that suited me.
Lovely.
And I think it might have been a casserole night on a Wednesday night. But you can see how you pick a theme, and most of us would have 3 or 4 curries that we could slot into whatever night we wanted to have a curry. And of course, you also need to look at your schedule. So there are some nights where you might have children in activities or your work day is particularly busy, so you need a slow cooker meal that night.
Yeah.
So
I love this. And it's such a simple idea, but I would never have kind of thought of it in that way, because as you're right, there's only so much in your repertoire that you as a family might like or use, and every now and again you might add in something new, but to map it out over those 3 weeks on a kind of rotating cycle makes absolute sense.
And it does. And what tends to happen is then you have seasonal. So in summer, you're probably going to swap some of those heavier, soups and casseroles with some lighter meals. And so you end up having a summer and a winter menu plan. And as the years go on, there are meals that drop off and other meals that come in. And so it's always evolving. And as your children get older, they start having a say in some of the meals that they would like to cook or like to eat. So it does evolve, but knowing what you are going to be having for dinner every single night, I feel is just one of the biggest stress relievers, time savers, money savers that you can possibly have. And these days, you girls are much luckier than I was, because click and collect, where you can order your shopping online and go and collect, it wasn't around in my day. So,
and I don't even collect mine. I have it delivered to my door, Nic, so there's no excuse.
Even better. Oh my gosh. And all that time that you would have been spending walking around the supermarket, bringing it home, you can spend in meal prep.
Yeah. And just for my understanding, how old are your children now?
So my baby turned 20 a couple of months ago. So between 20 and 25. And do you know what? They menu plan, even my boys. And don't get me wrong, they're not perfect in what they eat, but they take great joy in teasing me and telling me some of the highly non-nutritious foods they eat, but they do. They menu plan. I love it.
I love that. So you've shared some of the stuff in terms of how to feed your family in a stress-free way. I'm also really interested because clearly you have such knowledge and insight around the healthy aspects of this. So what kind of things could you share in terms of how we can make sure what we're doing is healthy?
When I went to university 30 years ago, it was very much, we learned the food pyramid. And I think over the years I experimented with, different things, because my main focus has always been to be as healthy as possible myself. Yeah. And so even while I was home educating my children, I was always reading, because I spent a lot of time in the library home educating, the latest book on nutrition. And so I would read, the latest book on whether it was the Mediterranean diet or raw foods, or then it became paleo and keto and all those kinds of things. So I'm always educating and trying to balance that with what I knew. And then I got breast cancer. So back in 2013, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I chose to lose my left breast because then I didn't have to have radiation, because I had done research in that area as well. And it changed the focus of what I was reading. So up until that point, if I had come across any material or anything sort of talking about cancer, I would kind of think, well, that doesn't apply to me. Because I honestly thought that my diet was healthy enough. But sadly, it wasn't, and I can look back now and see that my lifestyle was very stressed. I was living in a toxic, alcoholic marriage, and I myself was drinking some alcohol every night. And I kind of, took stock of my life after getting that diagnosis, and while I didn't wake up immediately to what was going on in my marriage, I did know that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I thought, well, what do I need to change? So the first thing I had to do was stop ignoring the link between alcohol and breast cancer. And so I stopped drinking. Then I just did a deeper dive into the research. And over the last 6 years, I have totally walked away from dairy products and animal products. And I can just really, I'm just so strong on the fact that I don't think that everyone needs to be totally 100% plant-based, but I think the closer you can get, the healthier you can be. And so I realize it's a journey, and I think that the best place to start is by just to eating more vegetables and more beans and lentils. And many of us just don't even know where to start when it comes to legumes, as they're called. And so I encourage my clients to just add a can of lentils to your next spaghetti bolognese. So immediately you're increasing the plant foods and decreasing the amount of meat. If you're making a chicken curry or chicken casserole, add a can of chickpeas. Just adding beans and lentils wherever you can is basically the first step. And I think the reason why this is just so important is because of the latest research where we've realised that 80% of our immunity is in our gut. Yes. And it's the fibre that feeds those good gut bacteria. And the fibre is only found in plant food. So there is no fibre in meat, eggs, fish, dairy, liquid oil. There is only fibre in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, so that's your beans and your lentils, and there's some in your healthy fats like avocados, whole olives, nuts and seeds. So it's just so important that we just begin that awareness of how can I get more plant foods into my diet.
I love this, Nic, because what you've given there was so many things you dropped in. I was like, oh my God, we need to come back, and I've been scribbling some notes. Is that you've given us a really simple thing that we can do to start on that journey. So as you say, just adding in some beans and lentils is really easy to do. So in terms of if you were meal planning for your young family now, because when you talked about what you would do, there'd be a spag bol, or there'd be a curry, or there'd be a roast dinner. If you were kind of going back 20 years, how would that meal plan across the week look differently if you were doing it now then? What might your Sunday family meal look like if it wasn't kind of meat-based?
Yes, that's a great question. And if that was the case, I certainly wouldn't be married to that man. And I think that's one of the hardest parts for women if they are on this journey and their partner isn't interested at all. And I encourage everyone to watch a recent documentary that came out at the beginning of the year called The Game Changers. And it's really directed at men. And it's all about men in the bodybuilding industry who are plant-based. And there's also some specific things in there that impact men directly. And so it often, while it won't necessarily convert a man per se, it will make him more open to his wife introducing more plant-based foods.
Thank you for reminding me about this, Nic, because when it first came out, I wanted to watch it. And at the time, we hadn't got Netflix. But am I right in saying that there's kind of Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver, and Serena Williams, the tennis player, are all in it talking about their plant-based?
Yeah, and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes, yeah.
It's quite phenomenal. And I think, we are in such a keto, paleo saturated society that we just do not realise how much research is out there supporting a plant-based lifestyle because there's no money in it, and our food companies do a lot of work to make sure that we don't find out about it. And even in my own profession, there's things I learned back at uni which are still being taught at university about protein, which are wrong. And it's because, really there's no money in plant foods. But so what would it, getting back to your question, what would it look like? And so when I've worked with clients in this area, we still have theme days, but it would be plant-based theme days. So it might be burgers on a Sunday night. And I have made so many different types of black bean burgers and lentil burgers. There are, if you just Google plant-based burgers, there's just so many out there. There's even some fantastic. I experimented with one. I did a product review on one the other day, and it's a plant-based burger, and it's a dried mixture, and all you do is add water and let it sit overnight, and then it makes into the patties. And I'm sure that would be an international company that produces that, and it wasn't that expensive. So for $8 Australian, you could feed a family of 4 or 5 with that. So because you just making the burgers, and I liked all the ingredients, so that was a big plus. So I would suggest you could have a burger night and have different types of burgers on a Sunday night. You might have a tomato-based night, so that's the night where you'd make your lentil spaghetti bolognese, your ratatouille that you've added a can of legumes to. Then you might have a rice-based night, cooking up your brown rice and having a rice-based meal. Then you might have a curry night, a stir-fry night, a pizza night. Do you see what I mean?
You're just intentionally coming at it from a plant-based focus.
Yes. Yeah.
Brilliant. So there's a couple of other things that you've said that I'd like to explore, but I just want to make sure that we're kind of wrapping up the conversation around the meal planning before we move on to those other bits. So what are your top tips then, if there's a working mum listening that says, actually, everything you're saying, Nic, makes absolute sense? What would be your top tips for them to kind of start this process and save the time and energy to meal plan their way to well-being?
I would start by keeping a record of everything that you make in your family. What the meals that you cook every night. And then, do that for a couple of weeks and then look back and look at the themes yourself. Now, when I talk to people, often it'll be, by the time I get to Wednesday, I've had it, we just get takeaway every Wednesday night. And I say, well, that needs to be our slow cooker night. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To be planning and prepping for that, for those things in your week. And then look at how you can possibly do the shopping online. And you do need to allocate a couple of hours to do your meal prepping. And that might be the night, I would try and choose to get your food dropped off at the time that you can then put away and do meal prepping right then and there. So you're not putting away and then having to come back into the kitchen again at another time to get foods out. So I would get, for example, the chicken out of the bag and chop it up, ready to go for the casserole before I even, put it in the fridge. And I would deal with a whole cabbage. So I'd get out my food processor and I would slice some and chop others and grate carrot and just, do a whole heap of vegetables in different ways. So they were, sitting in my fridge ready to go for whatever casserole or salad that I was going to be making. Because you know what it's like? If your vegetables aren't prepped, then that's when they sit in the fridge and rot. But if that celery's already chopped, you've already grated some carrot, you've already chopped up that cabbage, and they're ready to go, 9 times out of 10 you'll go, right, yeah, you'll push through and you'll make the meal.
I love this, and it's almost like you're being an organisational ninja with your food, because I've read, it's almost like when your mail comes through the door, they talk about the one touch, don't they? That don't leave it sitting there. If it needs actioning, do this, do that, and you're almost doing the same thing with your food, which I love that approach.
Yeah, look, and isn't it the same? How many mums do you hear saying, if I don't cut up the watermelon, it doesn't get eaten? You have to chop it up and have it ready to go, for your kids. And I think that's the same with most afternoons. I always try to do the cut up vegetable platter, and because then your kids will eat it, So I had them cut up in containers, ready to go.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that. So I want to come back to couple of things that you mentioned earlier, which was around, the first one was around the drinking. And I know that this is something that you're incredibly passionate about, having gone on your cancer journey. So could you speak a little bit more to that, please? Because I know that the culture around motherhood is very strongly linked to drinking. And I think some of the insights you share, we all need to hear.
Yeah, and look, what I have to say totally comes from a place of compassion, because I myself used to drink, and I still remember how wonderful it is to sit around with your girlfriends and share a bottle of bubbly, or have a wine at a meal. And I can honestly say, though, now 5 years on, I enjoy more not drinking. So I absolutely love not drinking. And so it was a process, and I think I had to come to that place of going, enough is enough. So after getting breast cancer, I didn't drink for a little while, but then the organic red wine crept back in. And I justified it to myself that it was organic and that it was okay. But it came a time where I read some more information, and I just thought, enough is enough, Nicole. You've had breast cancer, and you know the risks. And the risks are that alcohol, the link between alcohol and breast cancer is as strong as the link between smoking and lung cancer. And that is pretty frightening. And I think that it helps to understand that the moment we take a drink of alcohol, our liver has to stop doing a lot of its functions. And one of those functions is breaking down estrogen. Because your liver knows, your body knows, that if alcohol builds up in your system, because it is a toxic, poisonous substance, that you could die. So really, breaking down estrogen just gets pushed to the sideline. In actual fact, what happens is your liver doesn't take on any more estrogen, so your estrogen levels begin to rise as soon as you drink alcohol. And perhaps the most frightening part is that any of the half-processed estrogen that is in your liver gets dumped back into the bloodstream to be dealt with later. And it's that half-processed estrogen that is has the strongest link to breast cancer. So it is worth thinking about how much you drink. And I know for me, I just went away on a lovely girls' prayer retreat this weekend. And look, some of them had some wine, but that's when I take along kombucha. I don't drink kombucha on a regular basis, but that's my treat. And I still drink it in a wine glass, and I don't feel any less included, or I don't feel like I miss out or enjoy those moments any less because my glass doesn't have alcohol in it.
Brilliant. And I think you're very honest in your journey about actually how alcohol is a coping mechanism. And I think that is particularly in the UK, I don't know how it is in Australia, we've got loads of mummy sites that kind of talk about alcohol being a coping mechanism for mums. So it's kind of a known, but it's used with humour. And I think what you're doing is breaking down that and going, okay, we've all used it as a coping mechanism, but be aware of what the consequences of that are.
Yeah. And look, when people first start this journey, I encourage them to get out the wine glass, get out your kombucha, have that, or the mineral water with some lemons or some limes, so that, quite often we do these things because it's our mental, it's that habit, it's that way of going, oh, I can take a break now. Yeah. And we often do it with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and it's not so much the tea or the coffee or the wine per se. It's just that link where we're telling our body that we can knock off now, or we can have a little relax. So it's not necessarily the alcohol in the glass. And I know that alcohol has that relaxing part to it as well, because it does affect our brains. And I get that. I can see that that's what I was doing in my own life, being married to an alcoholic. My couple of glasses of wine paled into insignificance compared to what he was drinking. So I was always able to justify, it's only, a couple of glasses. But I was anaesthetizing what was really going on in my life. And I was also adversely affecting my health. So it is worth thinking about. And, even if just cutting back to where you used alcohol for those special occasions, and maybe it is a date night with your husband, and you share a bottle of wine or, a bottle of bubbly on the weekend, but really thinking very seriously about how much alcohol you drink on a day-by-day basis.
No, and I think that's really useful to hear that, because I think over drinking is really normalised in our culture. And I know that particularly in lockdown, I found myself going back to drinking regularly, and notice not only how crap I felt, but also, you talked earlier about the estrogen piece. I know that I have an estrogen dominance. So, hearing that and going, okay, and also knowing that, cancer is a subject that's really close to my heart. And I know I shared with you earlier, both my mum and my grandmother had it. So I'm always kind of at the back of my mind thinking cancer prevention. So when you talked about actually your body doesn't process estrogen if you've got alcohol in your system, what might be obviously the ultimate impact is cancer, but what other symptoms might somebody listening be experiencing if your body's not processing estrogen properly?
That's a great question. And it's something that I had to link together myself, is that, when you think about it, we are, if our estrogen levels are beginning to rise in our body, then anything that is exacerbated with extra estrogen is going to be, made worse. So your period pain. And I know that so many women say to me, when I'm not drinking and I'm eating better, my periods aren't as painful, my bleeding isn't as heavy. And this is true with normal cycles, with menopause. Women find the same thing, that their symptoms are a lot, less severe, or can, disappear altogether when they stop drinking alcohol and move away from that very heavily estrogen-laden foods like dairy and animal products.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking a lot of the conversations I have with my girlfriends are around, as we've seen to have got older, we're going to perimenopause, or, our periods are heavier and more painful. So just knowing that actually alcohol could be having an impact on that is really useful to hear.
Look, I get quite frustrated because, what we see with our young girls is that their diets can be terrible. They're very heavily focused on dairy and sugar and processed foods. So their periods are really bad. And so what do? They go to the doctor, and the doctor puts them on the pill. And what I didn't realise up until a couple of years ago is that when you go on the pill, what the pill does is the pill stops progesterone production, which means a progesterone is our happy pill, is our happy hormone. And then what happens is these poor young girls 6 months down the track are struggling with anxiety and depression. And so they go back to the doctors and they get put on antidepressants. And all of this could be circumnavigated if we had a look at their diets and cleaned up these young girls' diets. And it would just be a totally different outcome. And it's just, and of course, then once you start going on the pill at such a young age, you are setting yourself up for further issues and complications like breast cancer and infertility and all sorts of things down the track. So it's complicated.
Oh, but it's such an important thing to talk about. I got put on the pill when I was only about 12 or 13 because I got PCOS, and it took me. I came off it when my mum died of breast cancer because I was told that hers was obviously a hormone-induced breast cancer, and it would be wise for me to come off it. And of course, all my issues came to the surface, and it then took me on a journey of I'm picking all of that from a natural perspective. So I completely get this, and all it does is, and what we're talking about really is, again, with the alcohol, it just masks the problem rather than looking at actually what's going on underneath this.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned about how looking at your marriage and that alcohol really was an anesthetizing yourself to what was going on. What have you learnt looking back over that journey? Not necessarily the marriage per se, but actually how you were ignoring things in your life that could have contributed to your health?
Yeah, look, it's complicated, and I thought I think what I realised eventually is that I had great boundaries. Fortunately, I did look after myself. I looked after myself from a health perspective, from what I was putting in my mouth, food-wise. I also made sure that I was getting plenty of exercise. I managed to maintain my weight, but I wasn't looking after my emotional health, and I was allowing myself to be treated in a way that caused me a lot of stress. But the reason why I say it's complicated and I'm hesitating is because when you are in those kind of narcissistic relationships, you are being told all the time that it's your fault. And so you are working very hard to be perfect, to change, to not rock the boat. And you actually kind of want to believe that it is your fault, because if you can change, then hopefully all of this pain and nastiness will go away. So I'm not sure whether I'm answering your question or not, but it's I just have so much compassion for women because in those kind of situations, because you don't even realise that you're in them. You're really blindsided, and it often starts very subtly, and over the years it just grows, and it can get worse and worse, and by that stage you're invested, and you want, when your family means so much to you, you just want the best for your family. And of course you're reading all this material that's saying that the best thing is for husband and wives to stay together, and so it's on so many levels. You're just trying really hard to maintain that relationship and maintain your marriage, and I think, as we so often do as women, we can push those things down because of our children.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing you kind of say is that your physical well-being was in a really good place. So when you got the cancer diagnosis, you were kind of like, actually, how did this happen?
Yes.
But the emotional aspect, it's almost like the silent stress. You'd not paid attention to. And I'm reading a book at the moment by a guy called Gabor Mate called The Body Says No. And that is such a powerful book, because he's a doctor that's actually over the years come to realise that it's the emotional aspects that have fed a lot of our diseases, and that the medical profession just look at it from a physiological perspective. And just hearing him talk about the reason that women are predisposed to a particular type of diseases is because that we don't say no, that we don't take care of our emotional, we tend to put other people's needs before ourselves. And he's writing this from a medical perspective, and my jaw is just on the floor as I'm reading it, going, oh my gosh.
And it's so easy to overlook the fact that stress releases hormones in our body, and it impacts the good gut bacteria. Like, you know what I mean? It's so hard for us to comprehend because we just think of stress as being in our head, but it's physiological and in so many more ways than I think we even begin to understand. So I would be fascinated. I'll be tracking that book down, Nikki.
I'll drop you a link with it on.
Yeah.
So you've shared some incredible wisdom here, Nic. And if there's just one thing that you hope a working mum takes away from listening to this podcast, what would you want that to be?
So many things, but I think the one thing is doing a menu plan. I just really think that there's so much freedom in knowing exactly what you're going to be cooking every single night. So much room to be able to feed your family nourishing foods if you have a plan and know what you're doing. I just think it's one of those lifesavers for a working mum.
Brilliant. And you've inspired me to get my 3-week plan together. That's happening. So thank you for that. So finally, where can people find out more about you and your work?
So my business name is Naturally Nic, Naturally and NIC, and you can find me at my website is naturallynic.com.au and also on Facebook, naturallynic.com. Oh, Naturally Nic, yeah, NIC.
Fantastic. And I know that when we were talking earlier that you were saying that you are just so passionate about supporting women around this kind of whole topic that you'd be happy to have a 20-minute chat with people if they were interested in kind of diving deeper into their own situation.
Absolutely, yes. I have a 20-minute complimentary chat, and I just think that so many times just by hearing, when women are able to tell me their situation, and just to know that, yes, there is a way, there is a possibility, and I'm happy to have a conversation and give you some tips and get you started on that journey if that's what you desire.
It's such a wonderful gift to give people, so thank you. And thank you for reaching out. It's this conversation I've loved and there's so much goodness in it, so thank you for that, Nic.
You're so welcome. It's been great chatting, Nikki.
Wow, Nic was brilliant, wasn't she? I loved her really practical insights about how we can meal plan our way to well-being as busy working mums. But I loved hearing about her own journey, and you can hear how kind of passionate she is and how she's so on purpose with the work that she's doing. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, if you'd like the support of Nic and 30 other inspirational women, come listen to this. I'm curating a really, really special event where if you want to kick off 2021 in style and want to feel replenished and focused and ready for the year ahead, you're going to want to join me in this amazing lineup of expert speakers. And I've curated this lineup across the area of well-being, lifestyle, mindset, relationships, career, business and wealth to create the Thrive Summit. And it's an exclusive online conference dedicating to working mums just like you. And it's taking place on the 17th of January. Each speaker will be sharing their insights, advice, and actionable tips to help you feel inspired, empowered, and replenished for 2021 and beyond. And quite frankly, after the year we've had in 2021, we all deserve this and we need it more than ever. So to find out the details, head over to wisdom4workingmums.co.uk/thrive. That's wisdom for FOR working mums mums.co.uk/thrive. You're not going to want to miss out on this. So head over and check out all the details. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.